to do is I'm looking at doing this in phases. So I'm looking at like a very specific kind of phase one, phase two, phase three process
Mhm.
to get to the end game. So I'm just going to give you a quick glance here and see. There's no share feature, share screen. Um, so basically what you're looking at is down below here are like the different, oops, can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
So down at the bottom here, you can see where, try to change this, there we go. You can see where I've got like main dashboard. So I'm keeping notes and kind of working on stuff. But phase one is basically the home dashboard, content, people, which is drivers basically, and settings. And then I've got some other information in here. Basically, what I want to do, the end game is bringing in, so basically in the industry, and it's nice that you're kind of familiar because you've done some work, is there's a whole bunch of data out there, like that engine data. A lot of that stuff is fed from telematics data. So trucking companies can now pull in data. They get ELDs, which is a telematics tool, which is required in most trucks. Those trucks, those telematic units are able to pull in data on, harsh braking, speeding, harsh stopping, a slew of other things, not to mention the miles on the truck, just a whole bunch of data, right? And the hours of service for drivers. So these telematics platforms have all this data. Then we also in the industry have what's called a CSA, which pulls in all the roadside inspection data. So when you see a truck on the side of the road and police officers are walking around it, and they get what's called a roadside inspection. So anyway, the end game for me, initially, we're going to do everything pretty much that other people have been doing. It's not going to be anything new. We're just putting it all in one platform in phases. But the end game is what I call events. And basically, it's event management. So what I want is all the events that come in through all these different ways to be on one dashboard. And we're going to send out automatic training results. So what happens is a driver gets a speeding violation or a speeding duration. I'll explain all that later, but gets something, it's an alert for speeding. Automatically, training will go out to him that he has to complete it. It'll keep reminding him. Once he completes it, it automatically registers on the dashboard as done. So we have this complete cycle because right now there's somebody touching everything at every step of the way in the industry, and our goal is to automate that. So that's the very last thing I want to do. But in the meantime, we've got to get all these feeds in here. So we're starting that in phases. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, it's got a lot of APIs and webhooks and some different stuff going on. But I think the first part and probably the part I'm looking to get solved first is just moving us from Zoho into this traditional stack. And I was looking at like an AWS React platform, which looks like that's what you have a lot of experience in, correct?
Yeah, I would say recently the majority of my applications are React based.
Okay, so well, what else have you worked with? Because I'm kind of tossing around Angular and Azure, but I'm not sure if that.
So I haven't worked with Azure a ton. Well, actually, I did a little bit for a project that I was on a while ago. But Angular, I had a ton of experience with. That was my original SPA of choice, and then I gravitated over to React. But I've got experience with a lot of the smaller libraries too, like Lit, and yeah, I mean, I really you probably do want to choose between Angular and React, so it's kind of negligible. But yeah, definitely have Angular experience. Definitely have React. I started out as a PHP and Rails developer,
Oh, yeah.
a long time ago, and then gravitated over to JavaScript, TypeScript type platforms. But I still do a little bit of that work as well, so I'm pretty well rounded in some
As
Python.
a developer, I mean, what's your preference and recommendations? I'm one of those people that I took a couple classes on HTML and CSS. So, I know how to use like Git and Visual Studio. And I've got some like basic skills, but nothing that I get excited about. So sometimes I feel like I know more than I really do. So I like to prepare people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to act like I know what I'm talking about. So you have to say, no, you're wrong because I don't know. But so from a development perspective, one of my things is that I want to be able, the content piece of this, I want to be able to kind of separate that out from the rest through an API. And this is just something that's been coming to mind because there's a lot of players in my industry that are like, well, we want your content. We want your, what you're building. We like the videos and stuff, but we need you to have an API to interact with us.
Hmm.
So what I'm wondering, so I have two questions. One, do you think that's complicated? So when I talk about content, I'm talking about being able the user. So we would add our own video and training content. So with like questions and multiple choice questions and videos and text in multiple languages, like a big basically learning management content. But then they would also be able to create forms, multimedia interactions. They could create their own like policies, their own training modules with video and audio, and you know what I mean? Like a whole content development platform. One is, can we create, I'm sure I can create an API to go with that, right? It's just part of, I mean, if we can create an API for others to use. And my second question is, do the languages interact? So let's say we did build on JavaScript and Azure or JavaScript and AWS. So if somebody else has PHP or is building on Azure or using, I mean, do the languages talk to each other? I guess that's what I'm getting at. How does that work?
Yeah, so what you want to do in this situation is you want to build a RESTful API, um, and that's just I guess, a convention for how to build an API. But uh, everything after you've built it, regardless of what language you use to build your API, it can be communicated with via posts, GET requests, POST requests, put requests, just the various HTTP requests. So any language will be able to access the API. In other words.
Okay, so it's no big deal. It's language is a preference then. It's not like a requirement, if you will.
Right. So if we built an API with the intention of allowing your clients to externally integrate some of your content into their own applications, they could build with whatever application language they choose, and they could still, as long as we make it RESTful, they should still be able to use our API. We just have to give them some documentation on how to, which isn't a big deal.
Okay, so well, you made that sound much simpler than it probably is. So, well, that's easy. We have it done today.
Got it. Run
So
it.
it's let me see here. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. I have like a list of questions. Okay, so let's see. API experience. Yes, obviously you have that. You just answered that whole API question I had. So AI, have you done any work with AI, like built chatbots or had a chance to do any of that? And are you comfortable in that space or interested in that space?
Yeah, I got involved with marketing chatbots. I was working for a marketing agency, and that was a big, big thing of mine when they first came out. This is a while ago. But
Sure.
since then, since ChatGPT was released and then quickly started evolving, I've had a couple of projects that have leveraged API, AI. I've had two different fitness applications that I did as for freelance that both used AI mechanisms to basically we interface with the ChatGPT API to make workout recommendations for people. Um,
Here's
and
a recommendation: get off your ass and walk. There you
right,
go. Recommendation done. Back to being on. There's
right.
a ton of fitness apps, so I just laugh because I've
I
tried most
know
of
there's
them.
you know how many how many of these interviews I've been on. Those are two applications I actually took, but I have turned down at least 20 fitness apps because I'm just so sick of it, and I just feel like the market's saturated more or less. I like
Oh,
working with them.
100%. It's like you can go on YouTube and find videos you like, or you can, I mean,
Right.
it's everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yep.
So I just think it's funny when people spend money on something that is so hugely saturated. But
Right.
anyway, yeah. So the AI, sorry, I interrupted you. I couldn't help myself.
Oh, it's no problem. And outside of that, let me think. What else? I experimented. I had an auto blogging platform that was built for basically for ClickFunnel use. Just it's basically internet spam. I mean, it automatically scrapes sites and then it would rewrite articles so that it was original content and automatically post them. just for generating traffic
Oh,
and
that's
collecting
so
it.
cheating.
Yeah, I
That's cheating.
know.
You know how
I
people
know.
cheat? I
But it
love
was
it.
fun to
Okay,
work
just
on
learned
though.
about scraping yesterday, and I am all over that. I love the idea. I didn't know that even existed, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, I've done a lot of scraping stuff. But those are probably the most glaring examples of AI work that I've done. But in my own free time, I've messed around a lot with AI art generators and
I think one of the things I want to do is I want to put in that building content. I want to be able to add options for AI to help people create the content. So if I've used it a ton and we've created 20 videos, me and my advisory board, and I use it a lot of times, like just modifying scripts or creating scripts or answering questions, or I love Chat GPT. It's a little bit of an addiction at this point.
me too.
Um, but I want to be able to incorporate it into the building content piece because even though we're building content, I want the user to be able to build content of their own. So if they can put in, I need, one paragraph on why you shouldn't speed in a commercial truck, along with 3 questions. I want it to be able to do that for them and help them create that content. So
Yeah,
that is a big part of what I want to do. And then I also am considering having some AI on the main dashboard. So if people want to ask regulation questions or safety questions for their own knowledge, they can just tap chat, ask that of the chat bot.
yeah, that makes sense.
So, okay, so you like that. And then, so I found a React template that I like. And I have what I'm doing is I'm interviewing a few of you guys. And then what I'm going to do is send out kind of a group of content for you to review and then give me some thoughts on it and pricing. And we'll talk more about that. But the React template, I really like it. Have you ever worked with the templates or do you have pieces and parts that you use? Because it seems to speed up development time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have used React templates. Typically, what I use is like a design library, like a material design or something like that,
Sure.
and then I plug that into the app and then build out
Okay,
my
that
info
works.
just using that.
Nice. Yeah, because there's no like UI libraries that have all those little parts and pieces and
There's a whole bunch of them actually for React. I mean, so I would recommend React for your stack, just because. So the sole reason is because it's so battle tested and it's also so um, extended. It has so many people working on React things. So there's all sorts of theming options, all sorts of UI libraries, things that can make your process go a little bit quicker.
okay, nice. So let's see, I have a list of, yeah. So I've already talked about the content, the create custom content library. That is, like I said, that's probably the biggest part is creating content and being able to push that content out to truck drivers, which is my main audience is going to be trucking companies and then truck drivers, at least in the beginning. So that is probably the first part of the project, and we'll talk a little more about that. Let's see. So it sounds like you've worked with stuff from scratch then. You're full stack. So because right now I don't have a server. I don't have I have nothing set up. So it literally is beginning to end, right? The whole process. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming you have experience with that by what we've talked about.
yeah, absolutely. I, you know, I prefer starting from scratch really on projects. I mean, I don't prefer it by a lot, but sometimes I get projects that are just a mess that I have to like, reverse engineer whatever code they made, rebuild a bunch of stuff. So, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
would imagine it is easier on some level.
yeah, I like it. I mean, I like being involved from the start on things. Really, in general, it's just more interesting to me that way. But
Nice. And so what's your availability and talk to me a little bit about that. It seems like I've got a range. I have one person who was like, has to be 40 hours a week or I'm not interested. And then another guy's like, well, I don't really like to work more than about 20 hours a week. And I'm like, oh, I want your job. It's like, where do you fall in the scope of what you want to do and how many projects do you work on at once?
so
Like for
I
other,
prefer to work on the least amount of projects as possible. So I usually shoot for something close to 40 hours a week.
okay,
Um, but that's not always feasible for some people's budgets. So sometimes I'll
yeah.
split it up between two projects. Or sometimes I'll just work part time for a couple weeks, if the budget doesn't permit.
What's
Um,
your current availability?
I could get
Hours per
started.
week?
I'd be available 40 a week starting Monday because I'm wrapping up a client right now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, yeah, starting Monday, this is the last day on that project.
Nice. Good for you. Let's see here. That was all the projects. Let's server. Bunch of notes in here that I shouldn't have in here in my little cheat sheet. Let's see. Okay, well, let's go back to what the project entails. Let me find my share screen thing again here. Oh, one of the things I like to ask is communication style. So, clearly it's important that you have open communication, particularly in the beginning while you're still setting up, what it's going to look like and what you want done. But are you somebody who just prefers to have once a week kind of stand-up kind of quick conversation, or do you like a lot of interaction? What's your style?
I would say in terms of development, it's usually best to try to minimize the meetings. So once a week is great, but sometimes projects do involve a little bit more collaboration than that. So I mean, I'm open to daily stand-ups. Yeah, really whatever's needed for the project and whatever makes you comfortable as well. But yeah, I'm pretty self-motivated, so I don't require daily meetings. But if you needed them, I'd be available for it.
Okay. Yeah, nobody wants daily meetings. At least I don't want daily meetings. Like that's why I ask, and I don't mind like daily, conversations or whatever. But and I know isn't that the whole concept of the stand-up meetings is so they don't last forever. But you can't do a stand-up meeting when you're on a Zoom. I mean, I guess you could, but anyway.
Yeah, people tend to. I will tell you one thing. Once things started going to remote work, stand-up meetings used to be like 10 minutes when I was in an office. Now, clients just people have a tendency to ramble because they're on in remote situations. I don't know what it is, but
They're sitting there with their coffee like I am today, and they got all the time in the world.
I mean, I don't mind it. Usually, it's kind of nice, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to note.
Okay. Nice. Well, it's nice that you're social. I had a meeting with the guy yesterday and he sounded incredibly knowledgeable and he was great he was actually, I don't remember where he was at. Super, but he was so like disconnected from the conversation. And I don't know if maybe he's just like a savant developer. And so he's just like, because sometimes you get a lot of tech people who don't have a lot of like social skills, which has actually been, not the case, obviously, with you and a couple of other people I've talked to. But this guy was like just flat. I mean, no laughing, no joking, no comment. I mean, I'd ask a question and he would answer it specifically and then stop talking. So I wondered if maybe he was nervous. I don't know. He's probably a rock star developer, but I was just like, we got to talk all the time. How's this going to work? I'm like,
Yeah, there's a lot of introverted personalities in this line of work for sure.
yeah, and I'm thinking that's him. I mean, and I don't mind that. I was kind of like, perfect. He just wants to get shit done. I kind of like it.
Yeah.
But he was so quiet. I got off the phone and I'm like, I don't know if I can do a long-term project with him. Like, it's like a courtesy laugh. I made a joke at the end, nothing. Nothing. Not a comment, nothing. You just sat dead air. I'm like, okay then. Talk to you soon.
I'll tell you one thing though, there's a small red flag to that. Only because sometimes when you get people who really, really don't like to talk, they might, this is just experience that I've had. Sometimes they will try, or they won't inform you of issues when they come up, and they just try to fix them themselves. And I've had developers that are amazing developers, and they're really hard workers, but that's never good. You should really be more transparent about things.
Yeah, well, it's like, how do you like get on a call and just like have a conversation with somebody and develop a rapport so you can really find out what each other
What they need,
needs from the
yeah,
project if there's no like engagement? Because it just felt like he was a chatbot. I was like, I would say I think a chatbot has more engagement. I mean, it was
yeah,
the weirdest call, and I was, and he, like I said, he was probably a rock star, and he answered all the questions right, and but he like gave nothing extra. He didn't smile. I could tell I wasn't on video. We were like just talking like this, but I mean, there was no like lift in his voice. Sometimes you get the question, lift in the end, nothing. I mean, just flat. I was like, yikes. I got off the phone. I called my husband. And I'm like, I think I just met the next serial killer because he's the guy that he was so quiet and so polite, but he just never really talked much, you know?
Yeah, I do agree with you though. Like, it does require a certain amount of conversation and engaged understanding of the project when you're getting it on the ground level. Um,
Yeah.
some of these guys that I've worked with in the past are absolutely machines. They're great developers, but they need explicit instructions. They just think about code, and that's it. But,
Yeah. And yeah. And how do I just can't work with people like that.
right.
But, which kind of brings me to, one of the other things is I'm looking for somebody on a more of a like long term. This could be a contract to hire position,
Mhm.
or at least retain, a certain amount of hours throughout past the projects, like through phase 3. And then when it goes into more, we're just going to make this a little better and add this bit. You know what I mean? You go into that kind of, we're just adding product now to keep value. Um, so what's your thoughts on that? I know some people like to do a project and then be done with it. What's your thought about ongoing, assistance and continued relationship with the product and the company Trainx?
I would absolutely be open for it, and I do actually have ongoing relationships with a lot of my previous clients. They're just not necessarily consistent. They'll call me every, once a month and ask me for something that takes a couple hours. But I prefer long-term engagements, and eventually I would like to get out of, bouncing around between projects because I do like working on a single project, and building it over time. I really, it's exciting. So I'd say the only thing I don't like about freelance is the fact that I have to leave behind, these projects that I get to start and get attached to, and then, contract ends. But it's part of the job.
Yeah, I can see that. I've done some consultant work over the years, and you get kind of attached to your work and seeing the how it plays out, and then so
Right.
I could see that would be a thing. So good. Well, that's good to know. Um, so you're looking at my homepage again, I think, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I apologize in advance because I'm a big like planner, note taker, thinker. So just because it's on here doesn't mean that this is absolutely like the final thing. But I am a fairly like planner. And I know what I want. So one of the things that I know that in this space there's a lot of, well, we got to get to MVP, a market viable product, and I get that, and that is what phase 1 is of this product. But I've been in this space for about 25 years, and so I already know kind of what I want, what works. Like I said, I have an LMS currently out there, or like I don't even know if it's an LMS. It's basically, well, you'll get to see it. So anyway, so one of the things I want to do is provide you with some information. So like, for instance, I'll provide you with this. I'll give you access to my Zoho dashboard where I've been working to get this product built out on that platform. And then I just like stop midway through because I'm like, this is just never going to work. So it's kind of a mess, but it gives you kind of an idea of what I'm working on. So I'll send you access to that. And then also you'll get access to the spreadsheet so you can go in and kind of take a look at it. It's what I want to do. Like I said, phase 1 is just a standardized dashboard for the users that are coming in that work with the trucking companies so they can see content and what's going on and send out and prepare training content. uh, I guess the biggest part of this really is probably this content piece. Like I said, I want to use AI. I want it to be multimedia. I want to have some, word matching capabilities for interactive tools for drivers. I also want to be able to create forms, which includes like drag and drop. So, for instance, you go in and let's say a company creates a policy. I want them to be able to either upload their current policy and edit it, or drag and drop, or cut and paste, whatever their policy information, be able to add signature lines and like form or text boxes throughout the form to like pull in data, and then be able to send that to the drivers, have them complete it electronically, and have it come back and populate their file. So that's probably the biggest piece, and I think probably the more complex piece of what I'm trying to get done in this first phase. Um, and then the CSA equipment, events, and telematics, this is all API driven data that will be a part of phase 2. And then, so phase one is also people, which is basically truck driver applications and personnel information. So the first thing is we have to have a truck driver app. The commercial drivers, CDL, actually commercial drivers have a very particular set of regulations that are governed by DOT for what's called a driver qualification file. And that includes an application, a bunch of other documents. So that will have to be part of this online application, and the file. And it also has some API for some background checks, and I'll show you some of the API links in just a minute. Because when you hire a commercial truck driver, you have to get an MVR per DOT regulations. You have to do a history and background. You have to do a drug and alcohol. There's all these things that are required, and you actually get audited by the federal government, and you can get shut down as a trucking company if you don't have these things in place. So it's a really important piece of it.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
I just said gotcha.
Yeah. So it's important to get it right because it can actually make the difference between a company getting shut down or not. It's a
Right.
pretty amazing deal. And then settings, obviously, you have to have your hierarchy, who can see what and when, user access, all that, which I think is such an important part. Trucking is very territorial within companies. So not only do you have, your basic functionality, like, okay, so we have a super user, a user, and like an employee dashboard user. You have, just basic views. Well, in trucking, you also have to have, is this person HR? Is this person recruiting? Is this person in safety? Does this person only view, CDL driver data versus employee data? Because the reason I label this people is because right now we're focusing on drivers, but eventually I want to open it up so it will be all people. So it could be a complete onboarding recruiting tool for employees in general. But we'll start with commercial truck drivers.
Nice. Sounds awesome.
So settings, and then like I said, we have some general requirements. So I'll send you this and the stuff in blue, and then you can see my crazy notes by going through and just clicking on these. But I'll send this out to you. You can see it. This is some of the stuff I found that I liked for the main dashboard and kind of the pieces for the main dashboard. I put a lot of thought into this, and I'm sure it will evolve in a crazy kind of way over the next few weeks. But so my question is, if I send you this, I'll send you Zoho access so you can see just like kind of my half-done crappy setup in there. And then my website and the current learning management system I'm using. I'll send you all that. And if you can give me an idea of how long you think phase one will take and the cost associated with that. Now, I understand it's not a hard and fast. I'm not asking for hard and fast. I'm just trying to get an idea.
Okay.
I'm hoping to have phase one done and ready to go into, I guess, production or launch, if you will, sometime this summer or late this summer.
hmm Yeah, that seems feasible for sure. Just
Okay.
offhand. But yeah, if you send me all that access, I can definitely take a deep dive in and kind of scope it out into individual milestones and smaller tasks so that we can get a realistic estimate on hours consumption, and then we can, depending on what your capacity for weekly hours is, we can figure out what the estimate deliverable would be.
Okay. Yeah, so I have, I'm pretty well-funded startup. I feel pretty privileged in that sense.
Nice.
But obviously investors and I'm big on progress. I've gotten Visual Studio and I've done coding. I know it can take, I'm not like some dictator that's like, we're a weekend, where's the final product? That's not what I'm saying. But I've worked on, tech, IT teams where we've gone into projects. The last company I worked with, I was part of the leadership team, and we had this project. And I started there, and 2 years later, they still had nothing to show. We were spending,
Yeah, wow.
$20,000 a month in overseas developers in India.
Yeah.
Um, and we saw nothing. Don't get me wrong, we actually saw something, but it was not working. It wasn't connected to anything. It was just like literally something I could build in Visual Studio and have built in Visual Studio in about 2 hours. I
Wow.
mean, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm like, I want somebody West Coast time or, close to West Coast time. I think you're in Texas, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah. So somebody that's, at least in the US, I don't want to go overseas because I feel like you might get the thing about going overseas is they say, okay, you're going to get all this development for a less of a cost. But from what I've seen, it just takes a lot longer and you spend a lot more money in the end instead of buying somebody who's skilled in the US and just paying the higher rate. I don't, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people try to outsource to overseas people, and the time zone issue is a big
Yeah,
one.
because it's the middle of the night when it's our daylight hours.
Right, exactly. So you don't really have as good a communication. Also, there's just it seems to be, I don't know if it's a language barrier, cultural barrier. Just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect. Not that I have a problem with overseas developers. I've worked with a lot of them, and I've learned actually a lot from a couple of them. But yeah, that just always seems to be a small disconnect between, like, I guess the user experience, or the targeted user. I don't know if it's just because in certain foreign countries they don't have free business, and I don't know what it is, but I've noticed that before too, and that usually makes projects stall at some point.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted. I mean, and the project, I've been gone from that company for over a year and I still have friends and contacts that work there. And they're like, yeah, we still got nothing.
Wow.
I'm like, and they were spending, and they might have stopped spending at this point because the trucking industry is kind of in a slump right now. So they may have cut out, like, they may not be developing anymore. But I was just like flabbergasted. And they have a like 5-person tech department in Wenatchee, where
Wow.
I'm at today. And they have a tech guy in Seattle. I mean, and then plus they have this development team in India. I was just, I was like, where's the progress? Where's the accountability? I just don't get it. I
And it
just
was
don't get
two
it.
years, two
Oh
years
yeah,
ago. Oh
2 years, and it was a big project, but you have like phases of it done. I mean, in Agile, right? The whole idea is that you have, you set, or what are they called? What are those sprints? You have sprints, so you complete certain projects. It's
wow.
like,
Right,
there
exactly.
was no project management tool, there was no sprints. They would talk about the sprints, but nobody ever saw any production. I mean, it was weird.
Yeah, it seems like somebody was mismanaging that project. They should have at least had a Jira. If they have five developers, there's no way for them to all work together efficiently without some kind of
Well,
project
yeah,
management.
I mean, the people in Wenatchee, where there was one developer and then like four, well, two project managers who did nothing, you don't even know how to code, but they were friend of the owners, so they got to run the project.
Yeah,
And then you had two guys that just kind of did the like hardware stuff. But then there was like this whole team of Indian developers that were supposed to be like helping with this project, and it was bizarre. So I guess it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because all I could think about is my safety program has to be cut to this to afford that, and we're never seeing production. So it was frustrating.
yeah. I can't
But
think of a project of any size that. I mean, there are obviously projects of certain size, but any size that I've seen that couldn't be completed in 2 years with that many resources for sure. Um,
yeah, or at least partially. I mean, it just something. It was bizarre. I'm telling you, it was weird. Honestly, it was bizarre.
yeah.
So, but let me see what my question